You close your eyes. You see the future you want. A home filled with love, a thriving business, health that radiates from within. You can see it so clearly it almost feels real. But when you open your eyes, nothing has changed. Days pass. Weeks pass. You try harder, visualize more, chase after what you saw in your mind, but somehow, it still doesn't come. Why is that? It's because we've been taught to approach change backwards. We're told to wait for the job offer to feel successful, to wait for the perfect partner to feel loved, to wait for the bank account to swell before feeling abundant. We've been trained, conditioned, really, to believe that external events must occur before internal change can happen. That's cause and effect thinking. It's outdated, and it's why most people stay stuck. But there's another way, a way that doesn't require you to chase anything. A way where everything you've been visualizing begins to flow to you effortlessly because you've changed the one thing that changes everything. Let's call it what it is. Most of us are addicted, but not necessarily in the way we typically think. Addiction doesn't always look like alcohol, drugs, or gambling. In fact, one of the most dangerous and pervasive addictions is often invisible: addiction to who we've been. We become addicted to certain emotional states: guilt, anger, shame, resentment, fear, anxiety, worry, lack, doubt. These emotions, though painful, become familiar. And in the absence of familiarity, the human body panics. This might sound strange. Why would someone cling to guilt or hold on to shame like a cherished possession? Because it's known. Because it's predictable. Because at some level, the body, conditioned over years or even decades, learns to associate safety with sameness. It doesn't care if that sameness is painful. It only knows it's familiar. Now imagine this. You're standing in front of a blank canvas, ready to paint a new life. You've read the books, listened to the teachings, and maybe even written down affirmations or created a vision board. You want change. You consciously say, "I'm ready for more. I deserve better. I'm going to start visualizing a new future." But as you begin to reach for the brush and paint your new reality, something inside you freezes. It whispers doubts. It questions your worth. It summons old memories that contradict your new intention. It doesn't want to paint something new. It wants to recreate the same story in a slightly different frame. This is where the real battle lies. Here's what most people don't realize. You might think you're thinking your thoughts, but often it's your body that's thinking them for you. Let that sink in. Your body, through years of repetition, emotional trauma, and patterned reactions, becomes so accustomed to a particular emotional chemistry that it begins to run the show. It becomes the subconscious mind. The chemical state of stress, for instance, becomes a baseline. And anything outside of that familiar stress state feels unsafe, even if it's peace, love, or abundance. You might wake up one day and say, "Today I'm going to feel joyful. I'm going to start fresh." But 10 minutes into your morning, you check your phone, read a troubling message, and suddenly your heart is racing. You're tense, irritated. You didn't choose those emotions consciously, but your body recognized an opportunity to return to the familiar chemical state it's used to. It's not trying to sabotage you. It's simply addicted to the emotional cocktail of survival. This is how the body becomes the mind. It's no longer waiting for you to choose. It is choosing automatically on your behalf. And until you bring that programming into awareness, it runs unchallenged. Emotions are not just fleeting feelings. They are powerful biochemical signals. Every emotion we feel triggers a corresponding neurochemical response. When you feel angry, cortisol and adrenaline flood your system. When you feel rejected, it impacts the same neural pathways as physical pain. Over time, these repeated emotional states reinforce specific neural networks in the brain, and the brain begins to rewire itself to expect, and even require, those emotions to maintain its identity. Think of it like this. If someone has spent years in a state of unworthiness, that emotion becomes a filter through which they view every experience. It becomes the lens through which they interpret reality. Even when presented with love, opportunities, or validation, they often push it away, because it doesn't match the identity they're unconsciously addicted to. This is the invisible wall most people hit when they try to visualize a new life. They don't realize their body is saying, This isn't who I am. I don't recognize this. I don't trust it. They think they're failing. In reality, they're just running into the emotional programming of their past. The act of visualizing something new can feel deeply uncomfortable. Not because it's wrong, but because it's unfamiliar. And to the survival-based brain, unfamiliar equals danger. So what happens? You start hearing the voices. This is too hard. It'll never work. You're not the type of person who gets that. Maybe you're just meant to settle. These voices are not the voice of your true self. They're echoes of the old self, trying to stay alive. They are neurological signatures left behind by past experiences, memories, traumas, and repetitive thought patterns. And they're doing what they were designed to do, keep you in the known. But here's the paradox: the known is often the prison, and the unknown is where freedom lives. To truly create a new reality, you have to break the addiction to who you've been. This isn't about force or willpower alone, it's about awareness, about metacognition, about stepping outside the autopilot mode and becoming the observer of your own inner world. It's not enough to say, "I want change." You have to recognize that wanting change doesn't mean your body is ready to let go of what it knows. You have to become deeply aware of your current emotional addictions, not just intellectually, but experientially. Ask yourself, what emotional state am I most familiar with? What emotion shows up most when things don't go my way? Which emotions do I secretly return to, even when life is good? Start observing how often you fall back into those states. Catch yourself in the act, not to judge, but to witness. Because the moment you become aware of the program, you are no longer the program. You've stepped into the role of the observer. There's a moment, a deeply personal, often uncomfortable moment, where something within you stirs, where you stop trying to change the world around you and begin to shift the world within you. This is the beginning of true transformation. This is what it feels like to step into the river of change. It's not glamorous. It doesn't come with fireworks or fanfare. More often than not, it feels like loss. The loss of who you've known yourself to be. The shedding of an identity you've carried for years. And it's not supposed to be easy, because real change challenges every layer of your comfort zone. Why is it so hard? Because your body, so used to running on the fuel of familiar emotional chemicals, is now being denied its regular dose. The stress, the shame, the resentment, the fear. You've started cutting off the supply. And just like any withdrawal process, the body reacts. It panics. It resists. It screams. That's when the negative thoughts intensify. The inner critic gets louder. The cravings spike. Not just for the drink or the distraction, but for the emotions tied to your old identity. Your body isn't asking for alcohol. It's asking for relief. It's asking for the emotional fix it's used to. But here's the key. If you can stay conscious in that moment, if you can feel the discomfort and not run from it, not react to it, not distract yourself from it, you are no longer the program. You are now the observer. And the observer has the power to choose something new. Most people don't make it across the river of change because they think discomfort is a sign they're doing it wrong. In reality, it's a sign they're doing it right. Change is supposed to feel unfamiliar. It's supposed to feel shaky. You're walking into a space where your nervous system has no prior reference. That's what makes it transformational. When the body protests, when it says, "This doesn't feel good," go back to what you know. You must learn to sit in that space. To breathe. To observe. To stay still. Because each time you do, you're training your brain and body to become familiar with the unfamiliar. You're expanding your capacity to hold new emotional states. This is the work that rewires the brain. This is how transformation happens, moment by moment, choice by choice. In neuroscience, there's a word for this capacity to step outside of your habitual patterns and observe yourself with objectivity: metacognition. Metacognition is the awareness of your own thoughts. It's the act of watching your mental chatter and saying, "Interesting, I just had a thought of failure. I just felt the pull of old guilt. But I'm not that thought. I'm not that feeling. I am the one observing it." This simple shift is revolutionary, because the moment you become aware of how you've been thinking, you're no longer at the mercy of those thoughts. you've begun to disrupt the program. When you notice a behavior you've repeated for years and say, "That's not who I want to be anymore," you've already initiated neurological change. Your brain is no longer just running the record of the past. It's beginning to write a new one. The part of the brain most responsible for metacognition is the frontal lobe. It's what makes us uniquely human. It's the executive center, the planner, the decision maker, the one that can imagine a future and choose to align with it. When you engage in metacognition, you activate this powerful part of the brain. It begins to override the more primitive, reactive parts of the brain, the parts stuck in survival. As the frontal lobe lights up, your brain becomes capable of creating, imagining, and redesigning who you are. This is where the real power of visualization lies, not in wishful thinking, but in neurological rehearsal. When you visualize a new future from a state of elevated emotion, your brain begins to believe it's already happening. You're no longer just dreaming, you're reprogramming. So how do you apply all this in your daily life? Start small. Start now. Begin each day with awareness. Before reaching for your phone or diving into your routine, sit in stillness. Ask yourself, what emotional state am I starting from today? What thoughts are playing in the background? Throughout the day, pause and observe. When you feel triggered, don't react immediately. Breathe. Notice. Ask, is this a familiar emotion? What old story is this pulling me into? Visualize from the elevated state. Don't just think about your new life. Feel it. Embody it. Teach your body what it would feel like to already be there. Celebrate discomfort. When the resistance shows up, don't flee. Recognize it as the proof that you're stepping into the unknown, and that's exactly where you need to be. Let's start with a truth that sounds almost too simple to matter, but it changes everything once you really grasp it. Your body doesn't know the difference between what's real and what's vividly imagined. Pause with that, because if your body, the vehicle through which you feel, act, and experience, is constantly responding to your mental rehearsal as though it's your reality, then the inner world is not just a reflection of your life, it's the control panel for your life. That's powerful. Most people think change happens after life looks different. They think, once I have more money, I'll feel secure. Once I meet someone amazing, I'll feel worthy. Once I succeed, I'll feel confident. But the body, as the unconscious mind, tells a different story. It works in reverse. When you mentally and emotionally rehearse a future where you're confident, fulfilled, radiant, abundant, the body begins to respond as if it's already true. The subconscious doesn't argue with imagination that's backed by emotion. It doesn't distinguish a real event from a vividly internalized experience. It simply responds, chemically, biologically, and neurologically. That's not wishful thinking. That's neuroscience. Let's talk science for a second. In the field of neuroplasticity, researchers have shown that the brain physically changes based on what you repeatedly think and feel. When you mentally rehearse a new version of yourself, your confident self, your joyful self, your peaceful self, your neurons begin to fire in new sequences, patterns, and combinations. And guess what? Neurons that fire together, wire together. Which means your brain is literally building a new map, one that reflects the life you're practicing on the inside, even if it hasn't happened yet on the outside. There was a famous study at Harvard where two groups of people practiced playing the piano. One group practiced physically. The other group only practiced mentally, no finger movement at all. After weeks of repetition, scans showed something fascinating. The brain changes in the mental practice group were nearly identical to those who practiced physically. The mind, vividly focused, is that powerful. Now apply that to your life. Your confidence, your healing, your abundance, your love. If you visualize it with intention and combine that imagery with elevated emotion, joy, freedom, gratitude, love, your body begins believing you're already living that reality. That's when something extraordinary happens. You no longer just visualize the life you want. You embody it. Here's the key shift. You stop thinking of change as something outside you, and you begin to live as if the change has already occurred. Why is this crucial? Because your body, again, is the unconscious mind. It doesn't take orders from words alone. It responds to emotion, repetition, and belief. If you only speak positive affirmations but still feel anxious, doubtful, or unworthy, the body remains loyal to those emotional signatures. But when you think a thought and then feel the emotion of that thought, you begin aligning the conscious and subconscious. For example, if you think about a future where you're deeply loved and allow yourself to feel loved, appreciated, safe, your body begins to imprint that emotion as real. If you envision success and practice feeling empowered, capable, deserving, your internal chemistry begins aligning with that identity. That feeling is the evidence the subconscious listens to. And once the body adopts that feeling as familiar, it starts to crave more of it. That's when you know the reprogramming has begun. Let's zoom out into something even bigger. The quantum field, the invisible, intelligent field of energy that surrounds and permeates all things. Science has shown that everything is energy. Your thoughts, your emotions, your intentions, they're not confined to your skull. They generate electromagnetic signals that extend beyond the body and interact with the field around you. Now, here's where it gets thrilling. The quantum field doesn't respond to your words, your wishes, or even your goals. It responds to your state of being. It mirrors back the dominant vibration you emit, your habitual emotions, your deep beliefs, the identity you've internalized. So when you practice embodying a future version of you, not in theory, but in energy, you send a clear signal to the field. This is who I am now. And when the signal is consistent, clear, and emotionally charged, the field begins to organize around that identity. Synchronicities occur. New opportunities arise. People show up. Life starts to respond to the internal shift, not because you're manipulating anything, but because you're aligned with it. Here's where most people get stuck. They visualize abundance, but feel stressed when the bills come. They picture love, but still carry wounds from rejection. They imagine success, but doubt their worth the moment they check social media. And then they wonder why nothing changes. The truth? The universe doesn't respond to what you're imagining in your head. It responds to what you're broadcasting through your energy. It responds to what your nervous system believes is real. This is why feeling comes before seeing. You don't wait for evidence before you change your energy. You change your energy, and then the evidence begins to appear. That's not delusion. That's alignment. This practice is not about pretending. It's about rehearsing, intentionally, consistently, and emotionally. Step 1. Create the vision. Be vivid. Specific. Don't just say, I want to feel better. Picture yourself waking up in peace, moving through your day with joy, connecting with others authentically. What are you doing? How do you speak? What do you wear? What do you believe about yourself? Step 2. Feel the emotion. This is non-negotiable. Without emotion, there's no signal to the body or the quantum field. Feel it as if it's real. Not in the future, but gratitude for the love that's already yours. Confidence in the success that's unfolding. Peace as your natural state. Step 3. Repeat and anchor. Repetition makes it familiar. Anchor the feeling to a physical posture, like sitting upright, breathing deeply, or touching your heart. Over time, this creates a shortcut. You teach your body, when I do this, I remember who I am becoming. Now let's talk about the other side of this equation, the side no one talks about enough. To become someone new, you must let go of who you've been. And that's not always poetic. Sometimes it's painful. The version of you that's defined by fear, guilt, scarcity, control, or victimhood, that self doesn't just disappear because you visualized a better life. It fights to survive. But because those emotions, however painful, are familiar. They're the chemicals your body knows. They're the neural pathways your brain has traveled for decades. They are, biologically speaking, until they're not. Here's what it looks like in real time. You sit down to meditate and feel calm for a moment, then anxiety creeps back in. You visualize love, then remember the betrayal. You feel worthy, until your bank balance triggers your old fear. This is not failure. This is the death of the old self in motion. Your nervous system is being asked to stop producing stress hormones it's been addicted to. Your mind is being asked to abandon the identity it's clung to for safety. Your body is being asked to let go of the chemical signatures of your trauma, your stories, your emotional patterns. And it resists. It whispers, "This isn't real." It protests, "Go back to what you know." It screams, "This doesn't feel safe." And most people obey. They retreat. They repeat. They relive the past. But the few who don't? The few who recognize that discomfort is not danger but death, the beautiful, necessary death of the old identity, they become free. They cross the river of change. To fully rewire the body and unconscious mind, you have to shift your entire way of being. That means you no longer ask, "What did I experience today?" but instead, "Who did I choose to be today?" This is the moment you stop reacting from memory and start responding from vision. You stop waiting for things to change, and you start being the change. You feel the love before you're in a relationship. You act with confidence before the job offer comes. You embody abundance before the bank account reflects it. Because your identity no longer depends on circumstance. It is internally created, emotionally rehearsed, and biologically memorized. Here's where the science gets exciting. What if you could train your brain and body for your future before it happens? Studies in neuroscience confirm it's possible. When you mentally rehearse an experience, whether it's giving a speech, performing on stage, or living your dream life, your brain activates as if the event is happening now. You're not imagining. You're programming. The circuits begin to form. The brain builds a new map. You're no longer referencing the past, you're installing the future. Every time you visualize with presence and emotion, you rehearse your new reality into being. And with repetition, those new neural pathways become more familiar, more dominant, more you. You're not hoping. You're conditioning certainty. You're rehearsing how that version of you thinks, walks, speaks, loves, leads, and receives. And with each rehearsal, your body starts believing it's already real, because in many ways, it is. Your brain is made up of neural networks. When you think or do something repeatedly, the same neurons fire. Over time, they wire together. That's how habits, identities, and emotional reactions are formed. But here's what most don't realize. Imagination can build those same pathways. Athletes use this. So do musicians. Even stroke patients recovering motor skills visualize moving their limbs, and their brains respond. That's because the brain doesn't know the difference between a real experience and one that's vividly imagined. What it responds to is repetition, clarity, and emotion. So when you mentally rehearse from a place of deep presence, seeing, feeling, and embodying your future, you're training your nervous system to accept that future as familiar. And the more familiar it becomes, the more natural it feels to step into it. Mental rehearsal isn't just about seeing events. It's about becoming someone new. This means rehearsing how you wake up, what you think, how you respond to pressure, how you love and receive love, how you act in alignment with your future, not your past. Each time you mentally embody that version of yourself, you're building identity. You're not preparing to change, you're changing. This is the difference between passive visualization and powerful transformation. You're not waiting to become, you're practicing being. Here's the key. Your personality, how you think, act, and feel, creates your personal reality. So if you want to change your reality, you must change yourself at the level of identity. That means thinking in ways you've never thought before, acting in ways your old self would resist, feeling emotions you've spent years waiting for the world to give you. This flips the old model. Instead of waiting for success to feel confident or love to feel worthy, you feel confident now. You feel worthy now. And the world reflects back that shift. Because reality responds not to what you want, but to who you're being. Most people struggle here. Not because they're incapable, but because they misinterpret discomfort. Change feels unfamiliar, and the brain reads unfamiliarity as danger. So when you step into the unknown, start thinking differently, feeling differently, your body resists. Old patterns fight for control. Doubt creeps in. Fear tries to pull you back. That's not failure. That's the threshold of transformation. When the old self screams the loudest, that's when you're closest to breakthrough. So instead of retreating, recognize it, This discomfort is evidence that I'm changing. And keep rehearsing. You can't do this once and expect change. The brain rewires through repetition. If you've rehearsed fear, scarcity, or failure for years, that's what your nervous system expects. To override it, you need to make the future more familiar than the past. So rehearse daily. See the life you want. Feel the version of you who lives it. Act in small ways as that version now. With every repetition, those circuits strengthen. Confidence becomes natural. Gratitude becomes your baseline. Calm becomes your new normal. And eventually, you don't just believe in the future, you belong to it. Here's how to apply mental rehearsal consistently. Write out who you want to be. Be specific. Thoughts, actions, emotions, presence. Spend 10 to 15 minutes each day mentally stepping into that self. Make it vivid. Feel it fully. Emotion creates chemistry. Without it, you're just thinking. With it, you're rewiring. Each day, note where you showed up as your future self. This builds momentum. When fear shows up, when old habits resurface, don't abandon the process. Lean in. That's your edge. This is not about pretending. It's about preparing. You become what you mentally, emotionally, and behaviorally practice. So ask yourself, what am I rehearsing every day? Because whatever it is, that's who you're becoming. Now, instead of rehearsing the past, you rehearse the future. You rehearse certainty. You rehearse coherence. You rehearse freedom. And when your brain and body accept that future as real, life has no choice but to reflect it.